I like to grow my cucumbers on a cattle panel trellis. And you may wonder why I go through the extra work of putting up a trellis and training up my cucumbers when typically cucumbers are just as happy sprawling along the ground, and it's a lot less work, quite frankly. I am going to show you why I go through the extra step of trellising my cucumbers. First, and not least, is that trellising my cucumbers keeps most of the fruit up and out of the way of my puppers, who for some reason love cucumbers and will eat them off of the vine if they can. Now, obviously not everyone has that problem, but if you do, it's a good reason to trellis your cucumbers. But really, my number one reason for trellising cucumbers is ease of harvest. This method makes it so much easier to find the cucumbers and harvest them compared to something that's sprawling on ground or even on a low trellis, which I will show you in just a minute. And my second big reason for trellising cucumbers is the health of the plants. Growing them this way, again, gets them up off the ground. You're going to improve air circulation, and by doing so, you're helping the plants to avoid a lot of the diseases that come from wet, damp, dark conditions. So think bacteria and fungus and things like that. So you can see here, I let this guy get way too long, but definitely a lot easier to just come in here, find the fruit, pick it off, and you're done. Now, another benefit that I didn't mention is if you happen to be growing these types of cucumbers specifically, so Japanese slicer, or like you'll see them referred to as a burpless, English hothouse cucumbers, these types that grow really long, if they're up and trellised, they will grow straight. If they are touching the ground, they will start to curve. Really, it's just an aesthetic problem. It doesn't affect the flavor, but if you prefer the nice long straight fruit, like if you're growing for market or something, trellising is the way to go. Now, I set up my cattle panel trellises for cucumbers the same way that I do for tomatoes, which you may have seen in an earlier video. But here's a real quick little snippet of how I put them up. The process is easier with two people, but definitely doable with just one. And I will do 3 plants per 16-foot section. You can do transplants or direct seeding. Either one works in most areas. And I will put a small bamboo post on the base to train the seedling up until it reaches the bottom of the cattle panel. And then cucumbers tend to be self-supporting. They've got these little tendrils that will cling to the bars of the trellis. But I also find that tying up air vines and securing them with Velcro tape works to keep everything up and a little cleaner as well. So let's compare this to my other cucumber plants that I have on just a small A-frame trellis in the garden. So here are my cucumbers grown on this little A-frame trellis, which I think is about 3.5 feet high. And my idea was that they would grow up and over and I could get under here and pick the cucumbers, which kind of worked, but then the plants went crazy. And now I'm having to dig down in here to reach the cucumbers, which is very inconvenient. You can see I've got more kind of diseases going on. I'm not even sure what this is, but the leaves look wilty and terrible. And then the plants have sprawled all over the garden. So I'm finding it difficult to even find the fruit in and amongst these plants. Now, the one caveat to all of this being, you can get very compact bush varieties of cucumbers that will work really well if you have a very small space. There are varieties that will set out vines that are only about 24 to 36 inches long. And with those, of course, you could get away with growing on ground. You can get away with a very small little trellis or support. This would not be necessary. But for growing big, productive vines of cucumbers, this, in my mind, is the way to go. So be sure to drop a line in the comments. What is your favorite way to grow your cucumbers? Do you grow them on a trellis? Do you let them sprawl on the ground? What has worked really well for you? And if you find content like this helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.